So for today's episode, we will be talking about some spiritual stuff, and we're just really going to get into it. So Alisha just has a lot to share and just really excited to get into this conversation.
But the last relation that we had, I had a dream and I was attacked actually by 2 demons.
What has the process been like for you in your journey of celibacy? How are you able to continue in that? Because earlier we talked about how sex is not something that's meant to be started and then stopped, but you're doing that by God's grace. So how do you see the Lord helping you in that? What's up, fam? Welcome back to Big Picture Podcast, where we discuss faith, testimonies, and perspective with focusing on the big picture. While focusing on the big picture, I am your host, Susan Obi, and this is Big Picture. I post every other Wednesday, and I hope that y'all have been enjoying the episodes so far. These episodes and conversations are just things that I've been thinking through or have thought through at one point or another. And I also like to invite people on the journey with me and just hearing their perspectives. I think that's just a way that I've been learning, of hearing other people's perspectives and then just focusing on what the big picture is in each of our journeys. So for today, I have Alisha sitting here with me, and Alisha is someone that I met in church, actually, and we had a class together and just so happened to sit next to each other. And we just got to talking, and she told me how she wrote a book and just wrote about her testimony and how she felt that the Lord did deliver her from sexual sin. And that was just really encouraging to me, of just seeing her boldness and vulnerability and just writing out her story of the journey that the Lord took her on and is continuing to take her on. And she actually has a second book that she's working on. So we just started talking about that, and I told her about my podcast, and I was telling her that she needs to be on it because I just really loved her story and just wanted to hear more and want y'all to hear her story as well. So thank you, Alisha, for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast, Big Picture Podcast. So this is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So Alisha, you have a background in media and broadcasting and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from Wright State University. So to step back, I am from Dayton, Ohio. I'm a true Daytonian. And I went to Trotwood High School, graduated from there, and went on to work a little bit and then decided to go to school. So I wanted to go to school into mass media communication. That's what I graduated from. And I said, whatever I do, I need to pick where I'm going to land. Am I going to do entertainment news, sports news, or just, regular news? So I decided to choose sports. So me and my friend used to have a show on DATV, me and a couple other guys, and we also had a show on Blog Talk Radio. And we just did discuss sports, and all the things around sports. But my main thing I focused on was, what were these guys and young ladies doing beyond sports? So I thought that was interesting.
Okay, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So you're a pro at this.
A little bit.
Yeah, so can you share with the listeners just a little bit about who you are, your background, what you like to do, all those things?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm from Dayton, Ohio, kind of currently living in Columbus, Ohio. Wasn't expecting to come back home. I was living in the South, but the Lord spoke to me about moving closer to home because my parents are getting older. They've been married for 51 years. And I actually enjoy being back closer to family. It's a little bit of healing there. So I work at a university, which I enjoy. I'm still writing. I finished my first book 2 years ago and currently just finished up the second book.
So whenever I hear that people wrote a book, that just always amazes me. Just the patience that it takes to do that and knowing where to start. And then also I think there has to be some sort of motivating factor that's actually compelling you to sit down and be disciplined to write the book. So what compelled you to write your first book? Can you share about that and then the title of the book?
Absolutely. So as a child, I always loved reading. That's the first thing my mom put in front of me was a book. And ever since then, I always wanted to read them books. I was always drawn to reading and writing. So I started a book years ago, stopped. Started another book, stopped. So I always tinkered with writing. I've always been drawn to go in and just sit down and writing television scripts, writing books. That's just been like a love for me. I don't even know why I'm drawn to that, but it just comes natural for me. So when I decided to write this book, it wasn't something that I thought about even sharing. It's just something that I experienced, and it just blew up to be, a true testimony that, hey, maybe somebody else I can help with this. But as I sat down to start writing the book, I fought with writing the book because I felt like it was too much of my life that I was sharing. I'm like, these are things I'm going to take to the grave with me.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone knowing about it. And then here it is, the book comes, a couple months later, but I just sat down and focused on writing. It was just like a nonstop thing. I will say that I did fight with it. I fought with the Lord, I think, for like 2 or 3 months. And when I mean fought with it, there were certain things in chapters. For example, when I went through my deliverance, I get very vulnerable in that area, very open, and share specific details about things that probably will blow someone's mind, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she went through all that. But I fought with it. I was like, Lord, no, that is nobody's business but mine. I'm not sharing that. But he finally spoke to me and said, it's not only going to help women, it's going to help men. So I need you to write it.
What's the title of your book?
It's called Alisha's Testimony, Living Set Free and Apart from Sexual Sin.
So that's just really a vulnerable thing, to write about. Well, it's one thing to write a book about your life, but I think it's another thing to write a book about sexual sin and your journey in that, just about your sex life, essentially. That's just something that was really intriguing to me. And just knowing that, the Lord is just putting on your heart that this can help other people. So, wow. Yeah. Still amazing. Still working on vulnerability. So just the thought of writing a book about my life is like, because those are details that you feel like you don't need to share with other people, that you want to keep to yourself. And it's like you never know who's going to read it. So you don't know what people know about you. But then just being reminded that it's not about you.
That is so true. Yeah. When I wrote the book, first of all, sexual sin is not a popular subject. A lot of people do it, but they don't want to talk about turning away from it, or they don't want to talk about what's happening to them while they're in it. And I just share all of that. I share all the stories of the bad things that happened to me while I was living in sexual sin. Basically, living a life of having sexual intercourse with someone who I was not married to. Whether it's a boyfriend or a long-term relationship. That's basically what sexual sin is. God made sex for marriage couples, for them to be fruitful and multiply. He didn't make it for you to be out here free and doing it to whomever and whoever, in my sight as a Christian.
Yeah. So something that I think about when it comes to just that term sexual sin, and you just explained it, so thank you for defining that. I obviously don't know like the ins and outs of people's lives, but I think that there are some people who are just sleeping with their partner, that whether they're in a relationship with them or not, but they're not married to them. Maybe they're dating or maybe they're not dating, whatever it is. And I know that, well, from what it seems like sometimes people don't really feel like there's any problem with that they're not really having any sort of internal struggle. They're just like, it's fine, I love them, or it's fine, I want to have fun. And you're saying that with you, it seemed like it was something that you were struggling with, in a sense, that there was this internal battle of like, okay, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, obviously, because you were delivered from it and then wrote the book about it. So what would you say if someone's like, I'm doing this, but I just don't feel like there's a problem?
Right. So I would definitely start with asking them, what is your faith like? Are you a Christian? And if you're a Christian, what does that mean to you? I read the Bible from beginning to end, so I understand what it is to be a Christian, what it is to sin, and what that sin looks like. And sexual perversion or sexual intercourse without being married was a sin I was living in. And then I would ask, what's going on in your life? What are some things that are not going right? How do you feel after you have sexual intercourse with this person that you're not married to? And I'll ask them to be honest about it. Me, truthfully, every single time, the last relationship I was in, that's what most of the book is about. I felt some kind of way after laying with him. I'm like, this is not my husband. I shouldn't be doing this. It was always a sense of guilt. So I would ask that person, how do you feel? Are you just living a normal life? Then it makes me think that there's no conviction there in your life. You're not serving God and Jesus fully, or you're not looking at the ways of living as a Christian if you're not feeling any kind of way. You only can serve God or you can serve Satan. The lukewarmness in the middle that's being a little lost. Being lukewarm, it kind of reminds me of you laying in an ocean and just kind of floating. There's no end or there's no beginning. So I would kind of ask those questions.
Yeah, that's important. And then just recognizing that as a Christian, someone who has put their faith in Christ and believes that, okay, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And by that, like the way to live, that he is the truth, that the words that he's saying is true. And this is how I can actually live life. Like this is the best way to live. So someone who has declared all those things and just recognizing that the words in scripture is just the way that the Lord wants us to live, not only for his glory, but also for our good as well. And just seeing it in that lens of not like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, and just feeling that it's a burden of just knowing that God is for us and he's on our side. So can you talk a little bit about your experience before you wrote the book? So when did you realize that, okay, what I'm doing is not sitting right with me?
So I was engaged before years ago. And it sounds funny saying years ago, but I was engaged and it didn't work out. It didn't work out because it turned into an abusive relationship. I knew that was something I had to walk away from. And after that relationship, it took a very long time for me to even kind of go into another relationship. And I did with him. And when I did, there was no talk of, are we going to settle down? Are we going to get married? We didn't have that conversation. We just started to live like we were married, even though he had his house and I had my house. But we were still coming together and living in a way that we were married. And I knew it was wrong. So,
why would you say that you knew it was wrong? Would you say it's because of your upbringing or just in general, it just didn't feel right?
Mm-hmm. Probably my upbringing. I was playing house with him. He was coming over as he pleased. I came over as he pleased. As a Christian growing up, I was taught certain ways, as an actual believer in how you're supposed to live. If you're serious about somebody, then talk about, what's the next steps. Marriage will be the next steps, and then possibly considering having a family, or if not having a family, just marriage, and living life together, not playing house where I'm over your house, you're over my house. We're not married, but yet we're having sex.
So you talked about being in an abusive relationship. Was that difficult to leave, or was that something that you feel like the Lord just really had a hand in it falling apart? How did that end? And how was that process?
Yeah, I think the Lord had a hand in that. I was really young, probably early mid-20s. And, the Lord spoke to me about him eventually later on in life. He even told me, this is somebody you shouldn't have never even met. Y'all shouldn't have never even crossed paths. And that kind of took a toll on me because I'm like, I think I'm making all the right decisions. I'm thinking I'm hearing from the Lord. I think I'm being led, but the Lord doesn't lead you into pain. So there was a lot of pain with him, and in that relationship. And I just knew like I couldn't live my life like this. Even marrying him, I'm sad. I shouldn't be sad.
Mm. I'm thinking about when you said you just felt like the Lord is putting on your heart that y'all should not have crossed paths. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So as I was in prayer one day, I was praying over the book and like, okay, Lord, where do I go? How do I start this book? I didn't want to put too much emphasis on the prior engagement because it wasn't about that. This book was led on the last relationship I was in and all literally the escapades I went through thereafter. But in prayer, the Lord was like, well, when you met him, the person you were married to, it was someone I didn't even want you to meet, but you didn't listen to me when I told you no with him. I ignored it and pursued it. So I heard the no, when you're in prayer, like, God, is this the right person for me? He's clearly telling me no. And what do I do? Clearly ignore it and move on. So I knew it was a no, but I ignored it. And he circled back around to remind me, well, this was something I didn't have for you.
Yeah, I think that's really cool how God still uses our story and the paths that we take, even though it may not have been the path that he wanted us to take. That's just something I wanted to highlight about God. And you just see that a lot in scriptures too, of just, if people go the wrong way or if God's like, no, you're not supposed to do this and they still do that, like he'll turn that around. And I mean, yeah, there's multiple stories like David and Bathsheba and how he slept with the woman that he was not supposed to be sleeping with, someone else's wife, and how through that relationship they had Solomon, and Solomon built the temple for the Lord, and just how I just see God's goodness and how he turns things around. So yeah, that's really, really amazing. Okay, so can you talk about the point, or if you just remember the point in your life, or maybe even the moment in your life where you realized, okay, I need to get out of this relationship. This is not right. I'm out. So what was that day like, or the moment, or if you just remember that season, can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So there was an incident that happened after him and I had relations. I had went home. I was having dreams. God was speaking through me in dreams. And I've always been a dreamer, but these dreams were warning dreams that I wasn't aware they were warning dreams. He was showing me that destruction is going to come in a way that is going to shake you, where I'm trying to pull you away from this sin and pull you closer to me. I think it was just a time in my life where God was like, I need you to hear me. I need you to come to me in prayer. I need you to talk to me. And I wasn't hearing it. But the last relation that we had, I had a dream, and I was attacked actually by two demons. These two particular demons, that was one thing I prayed for. I asked God to not only show me the attacks, but what was the attack? What's the name of this attack? Because all demons have names. And in this particular attack, I was visited by two demons, one called incubus and one called succubus. So the first dream I had, I was with him. I discussed it in the book, and I didn't even know what it was. So when I woke him up and told him about it, he sat on the edge of the bed. He put his head down. And he said, we got to stop. We got to stop. I'm like, what do you mean we have to stop? What are you talking about? He said, that was a warning dream. You had a dream of incubus and succubus. And he actually explained to me what they were. And I'm looking like, so you know what these are? I'm like, wow. And that just gave me more thought about, what am I doing here? You know, he knows about this, but yet he's still living, the lustful lifestyle with me instead of teaching me. I felt like you could have taught me these things. Maybe we could have stopped, but I was attacked and he wasn't. So I think that was my warning to, hey, I want you to stop. So I'm going to remove my hand like Job and let you see what's going to come to pass.
Okay. So demons are real. I believe that. I believe in the spiritual realm. The scriptures talk about that. These names that you're naming, I'm not familiar with. So can you share a little bit about that? I'm not familiar with that in the scriptures, actually. So can you share about that? And then also how he knew that? So why did he know that?
That's a good question. I have no idea to this day how he knew that or the names of them. So after I found out he knew about it, I went to my friend. My friend used to do war ministry. She used to go over to different countries and actually do, war ministry and pull, pray demons out of people. So she knew about it and she gave me the history behind it. So that's when I started to kind of dig around and learn more. There's a pastor by the name of Earthquake Kelly, actually just passed away, God rest his soul, but he wrote a book about it also. Actually was in contact with him to learn more about these two spirits. So they came to the point where I was pressed down at night. I was held down. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't scream. And I'm freaking out. Like, I don't know what to do here. And as I shared that with people, I noticed that it was happening to more and more people. They didn't realize it was a thing until I kind of explained what it was. So it was something I was still learning about.
Okay. So how can someone learn about this? So I'm hearing about it from you, and then you're saying that you talked about the pastor, Earthquake Kelly, that had the warfare ministry. So how can one know about these things?
From what I noticed, learning about different spirits and demons in the Bible, a lot of it is talked about in the Old Testament. Like the demon, okay, so in the New Testament, when Jesus casted the spirit out of this particular person and he put him in the pigs, it was a legion. So a legion is the name of a demon. For what Pastor Kelly told me, there's certain curse words that have their names of demons. He learned about this because he was in a world that was demonic and he came out of it as a child, but he was the one that kind of taught me all of those things. So some people dress up as those characters for Halloween, not knowing what comes with it. But yeah.
How important do you think it is to be aware of the spiritual realm?
Yeah. When you open yourself up to sin, in any kind of way, not even just sexual sin, but any way, I think you're leaving a portal open to your body to allow Satan to come in and play as a playground to your mind, your body, your spirit, and your soul, which can cause other things such as sicknesses and whatever else comes along with it. And I think that when you're in sin, you have to realize that things aren't going to go my way because I'm in sin. And those things have to be closed in Christ. Close those portals, close those doors, come out of that sin to be set free. Living in Christ is not going to be perfect, right? You're going to have things that come, but you know how to tackle those things a little better, living for Christ.
Yeah, that's really, really intriguing. And I know the Lord speaks to people in different ways. I mean, I think that he communicates to people in the way that he knows that this person is going to get it through this, and in the way that they'll understand. So, just wanting to hear a little bit more about your story after you shared with him that you had that dream and he was like, I know who those demons are. So what happened after that? Like the next day, like the next weeks, what happened?
Yeah, good question. So after that happened, this was another thing too. We worked together and I made a vow to never, ever deal with anyone I worked with, but I caved in. So we would see each other at work. I was standoffish. I didn't want to see him. I was shook. The first dream really shook me. It was the second time when I eventually went back and we started back up. I went back and I was attacked at home. So I left his house, showered, went home, usually pray, say my prayers. I wasn't on the path of praying when I was with him. I was just, going to sleep and not feeling protected. Always when I pray, that's my form of protection, especially at night, putting on the armor. I didn't do any of that. And then that's when I got attacked by the two spirits. I literally I felt the demon on me. I woke up in the middle of the night. I felt it pressed against the hand. It was very heavy. It was very, very strong. I felt the hand over my mouth. I felt the impression over my chest where I couldn't move. I had like the carpet where, it's that tiny, I can't even think of the name of that carpet, but you can hear every step. Like if a cat or a dog was walking, you can hear their nails. I heard the nails clawing in the ground beside me. So that's how I knew two of them were in there, one on me and one crawling, and I couldn't do anything. And finally, I was able to peel my mouth open and scream, Jesus, Jesus. And I had to do it over and over and over. And it finally went away. And right then and there, I was like, no more, no more. That was my wake up. I told him, this has to end. We're not going anywhere. We're not discussing any future. So let's just end it now. He kept coming back. He didn't want to accept it at first, but I knew I couldn't go through this again. I just said at this point, I would probably see him in my room, like, yeah, you're mine or whatever. But at this point, I had to stop it and let it go. And then that's when actually I had moved to another state and dealt with other issues there, came back and moved to Indiana. And that's when I knew I had got on my knees and I told the Lord, I said, I want to surrender it all. I can no longer live this form of sin. And I said out my mouth, I'm going to live for you. I'm going to wait till you choose a God-ordained spouse for me. I'm going to, live a celibate lifestyle, and I surrender it all. I didn't know what was going to come thereafter. I just knew that I had to relieve myself from that pain.
Yeah, that's really powerful. What would you say, other than the spiritual attack of the demons, what would you say was the problem with what you were doing?
The sin itself. I definitely believe it was the sin itself. I interviewed two guys in my book, and I wanted to interview men because I know it would probably be mostly, female readers, but I wanted them to see men discuss, this sexual sin. So I interviewed a guy that never fell into sexual sin. He was a virgin. And I interviewed a guy that fell into sexual sin, actually really, really young. It shocked me, I think the age of 9. So the guy that didn't fall into sin, his thing was, I'm tired of being a virgin. I'm tired of living like this. I'm ready to do something. I just listened and I put my head down and I let him finish. And I'm like, what do you want to do? What are you tired of? How are you tired of something you've never tried? God meant sex for a marriage couple, and you believe that because you're waiting to be married to try it. He didn't mean for you to start it and stop it like I did. I said, you don't want to know how it feels to start it and then stop it. And he was like, wow, that actually set me back to reality. I'm like, yeah, because it wasn't meant to start and stop. It wasn't. Straight up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sitting with that because God created it. And I talked about this a little bit in the episode where I talked about, is lust normal? And just knowing that God created sex, and in the scriptures he talks about how it's between a man and a woman that are under a covenant and relationship. It's good. Sex is good. And marriage is good.
Absolutely.
And God put those two things together intentionally. Yeah. It wasn't meant to be started and then stopped.
Right. Everything he made was good, and he made it good for marriage. He didn't make it good for a single person. Who was it? Paul. I believe, I don't want to misquote anything, but Paul said, is you better to marry than to burn.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I'm misquoting.
That's right. Yeah.
So either you're going to live a single life like him and do the works of the Lord, then you need to be happy with that and be settled with that. Or you're going to be married. You feel like, oh, I'm burning. I can't do this. I need to be married. And that burning sensation is, I want to be with my husband, or I want to be with my wife. And that's what it means. It's either, single or married. So in my singleness, I talked to the Lord. I asked him, I said, Lord, is it even meant for me to be married? If it's not, then allow me to no longer feel the burning sensation of wanting to be married. And he showed me in dreams. He showed me, no, I have marriage for you. But you did ask me to provide you, with that person. So I'm sitting and waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there can be shame that comes with that desire and that burning sensation to want to be loved and be loved, and, want to be in a relationship or want to fulfill those sexual desires that we are created with as human beings. I think especially in the church, there can be shame around that. But I don't know. I just don't think there should be shame, because it's something that God created, and he's giving us a solution. He's like, this is how I created you. Like, we all have that desire to love and be loved. And God is saying this is a good thing under the context of marriage. So I just see God's goodness in that, and just creating this beautiful thing for us, and then showing us how to best use it and to steward it. So it's not, those things are not bad, and those are not things that we should feel, ashamed about. Yeah. So you were talking about your journey of your sitting and waiting. How is that process right now of waiting for the right person and waiting to be married? What do you think that has been like for you?
Yeah. So waiting, of course, is not easy. It's not easy. It was very hard in the beginning. Again, turning that off and now having to, wait patiently. So what do I do in the wait? I keep myself busy. Birthed a book. Birthed a second book. I work out, pray. Sitting here turning away from sin, I developed the spirit of speaking in tongue. I never even thought in a million years I would learn that language. And when I hear it flows, it's so amazing, because I know I'm talking and having a conversation directly with the Lord. I've asked him to give me the gift to interpret, what I'm saying. So a lot of times when I'm talking, I hear what I'm saying in English. When other people speak in the spirit, I've asked him to help me interpret that. So I've seen the gifts that come with, being patient and waiting. But I'm patient with myself, but I keep myself busy. I think that's what kind of helps me.
Yeah. What would you say that process has been like for you with waiting, in the sense of, like, you're sharing these things that you've been doing and how the Lord has been molding you and helping you grow spiritually? I know when people talk about waiting, especially like in the Christian context of waiting on the Lord to eventually be married, there are some times where people talk about it in the sense of, I'm sitting here and I'm waiting and I'm not actively pursuing anything. And then other people talk about it in the sense of, I've been going on dates. I'm trying to meet people. I'm trying to see if the Lord might maybe bring someone. Is it more passive or active, would you say?
Yeah, I would say active. I'm not on any sites. I kind of fear those a little bit. When I was engaged and we broke up, I did go on a few sites. I met a couple of people. It was just weird. And I was like, I can't get with this. So now what I do is, like, I kind of go to different events. I travel a lot. I go to different events, conventions. There's a couple things I'm doing this summer. Now that I have the book, that keeps me busy with, book fairs, meeting like-minded people. I've actually connected with a lot of people now. I even think that may be the way that I meet someone, with going to certain events and getting out there and, kind of publicizing myself in the book as well. It's been great, though. Made some great connections.
That's really cool. That's awesome. I have this question that I've always thought about, so I'm going to ask you. So sometimes I hear people say things like, I think especially in a Christian context and with women, of just waiting on the Lord for a marriage and thinking, I'm not sure if this is something that the Lord has called me to. And if he's called me to be single, then I'll be okay. And if he's called me to be married, then I'll be okay. How can someone know that they're being called to be single? Or how can someone know that marriage is going to be in their future? Or do you think that that's just something that you cannot know? Does that make sense? Because I think a lot of times, like for women who are maybe like their friends around them, they're getting married or they're dating and they're not dating and they feel like, okay, maybe I'm called to be single. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you think women who are asked the question of, are you dating, or do you think you're going to get married, or just, questions surrounding relationships? I do think that the Lord gives us the desires of our hearts as we're delighting in him. In other words, it's saying that as we are praying and seeking the Lord, that the desires that we begin to have are the desires that he's giving us and that he's putting on our hearts that he will eventually fulfill. So I don't think that the desires to be married or in a relationship are those that are wrong, but I can see women kind of suppress those desires, especially when it's something that's not coming to pass in that moment. So I see or hear answers like, well, if it's the Lord's will, if he's calling me to be single, I'll be okay with that. And I think that there are people who have gotten to that point. This is just my perspective on what I'm seeing. I think there are people who have gotten to that point, and you can just see that in how they're responding and the way that they live. But then I do think that there are people who are not at that point where they would be okay being single, that they really do desire to be married. So my question is, how do you think that someone can know that the Lord is calling them to be married and they will eventually be married? Or or that the Lord is in fact leading them into a lifestyle of, just being single, that eventually that they're not going to be married?
I would start with, like if I was talking to a group of women and that was one of the questions that came up, how's your prayer life? Do you talk to the Lord? Do you have a prayer life with the Lord? What does that look like? Do you even know the goals that are set before the Lord that you're asking? Ask the Lord questions. I ask the Lord questions all the time. If it's the Lord's will, you hear a lot of different things. When I start off in prayer. I'm fasting, and I'm writing. I'm a journalist, right? I write down a lot of things. So before I start to fast, I prep. I write down questions. These are the questions that I'm going to ask you, Lord, in this fast, and I am hoping that you respond to me, whether it's in a dream, whether someone comes up to me and says, hey, I was thinking about you, and they're giving me the answer, and I'm like, they didn't even know I asked that question, So what's your prayer life? Are you asking God these questions, and what does that look like? So for me, I started in a fast, and I asked the Lord, I want to be married. Do you have marriage for me, or do you have me to be single? If you have me to be single, help me to prepare a life to live a single life, a fulfilling single life. If you have marriage for me, show me how to do X, Y, and Z with a marriage. Prepare me. So when I asked him those questions, he did indeed tell me, I have marriage for you. So when he told me he had marriage for me, he started showing me a silhouette of, a spouse in a dream. He showed us walking hand in hand. He showed us doing things for the church, serving him, in ways that would gratify the Lord. He showed me these things. I said, okay, you have marriage for me. Now what do I do with that? I start preparing for that. I want to become a better cook, so I start preparing for that. I start working out and preparing my body. I'm an older woman, may not look like it, but
you look great.
Thank you. What if he has a child for me? I got to prepare my body for, being able to carry a child, and it needs to be healthy. I need to start eating better. I'm praying for this guy I don't even know yet. I started praying for him. I started asking things to be removed from him. I asked the Lord to allow me to show up in his dreams and visions. And I ask God in his proper timing to pair us together so that we can meet wherever we are. So if God does have marriage for you, it doesn't matter where you are. He's going to send him to your state, or you're going to go to his state and visit, or wherever. And there you go. You guys are going to meet. But you got to ask God first. You got to ask him to show you. And if he's showing you to be single, and even though you don't want that, ask God to turn it around. Like, Lord, I wasn't expecting that. Why do you have me to be single? I don't want to be single, and give it, prepare your story. Talk to the Lord. I don't want to be single. Why do you have singleness for me? and maybe he'll show you, maybe he won't show you. It's the Lord. He can do whatever he wants to do. But just start preparing your body and your life and showing the Lord, this is what I want. But if you're an active working woman and you don't want to be married or don't want to be, to have a husband or have a spouse, he's going to prepare you for a fulfilling life in singleness.
Yeah. Either way, you'll be fulfilled.
Absolutely.
As long as you're continuing to walk with the Lord. I think that's true for just in any situation of just knowing that fulfillment comes from the Lord.
Yes.
So just, ask the Lord questions, and he's open to that. He's open to questions.
He is waiting.
Yeah. And he'll respond to those questions for sure. Like, he wants us to seek him. What has the process been like for you in your journey of celibacy? How are you able to continue in that? Because earlier we talked about how sex is not something that's meant to be started and then stopped, but you're doing that by God's grace. So how do you see the Lord helping you in that?
Yeah, the Lord keeps me busy and my mind just goes. I'll think of new things that I want to work on. Eventually, I want to open up a nonprofit, and he's given me so much information on what to do, where to start. I'm going to eventually start taking classes to learn more about that. I personally keep myself busy. I can't sit still. I can't sit still because my mind will wander, and I don't want it to wander. So I have to rebuke certain things. I can't watch certain things. I don't want to even read certain things because I don't want to open up those doors for Satan to kind of come around and play a little bit. Because remember this? No, I don't remember that. I want to remember this over here, So the Lord is keeping me busy in those ways to keep my mind off wanting to, have a spouse right then and there. But I do pray for him, whoever he is. I pray for him, his family. I pray things off of him because for all I know, I'm sitting and waiting, but I could be ready, but maybe he's not ready. So I'm preparing for, and praying for his readiness and things like that.
Yeah, that's good. And something that stuck out to me of what you said was you're not watching certain things. So in the episode when I talked about is lust normal, so that was, I don't remember when that was, a few months back. A recent realization that I've had is there are certain things I shouldn't be watching, certain scenes on TV shows or movies. And I think in the past I've just been really naive of, okay, I don't care. It's not a big deal. They're just kissing or they're just doing that. I know growing up, that was always a thing. My parents were like, oh, you don't need to be watching that, and just change the channel or fast forward or skip it. And at this point as an adult, I'm like, it's fine. But I think that was just me being naive because the things that we watch and hear, at least for me, that plays a role in what we think about. And I think that it does impact us as people. That's just the way our brains work. When we take something in, then it's in us. It's in us. And what's in us will show itself in different ways, whether it's how we behave or how we speak or the way that we view things. So I think that's just a really important reminder that what we take in stays in us, whether we realize it or not.
I kind of wanted to talk about the lust there that you mentioned. When you think about lust, it's like a building block that can lead you, to me personally, to sexual sin. Because just think about it. Lust starts with just a thought, right? And when you think about certain things, that can turn into fantasy. And pretty soon people can act out on those fantasies and it can turn into something where I wasn't expecting or wanting to do this. So you could be watching someone on television or even the shows that you watched growing up. I was just having this conversation with somebody. I said, a lot of the shows I watched growing up, they didn't have a type of, it wasn't a Christian relationship. It was a girlfriend, a boyfriend. They were living together. They were freely having sex and they went on about their life. I'm like, they never talked about, well, you live here, I live here, we're going to have a monogamous relationship and, you're going to court me and we're going to do this thing and we're not going to do that thing. We didn't have that, so to me, lust builds on something else that can be damaging to you over time.
Yeah, over time, because you might not see it immediately.
Exactly.
There's a scripture I want to pull up. Okay, so Jesus says this in Matthew 15:11. Hear and understand, not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth. This is what defiles him. And so what Jesus is saying here is actually pretty profound, obviously, but just saying that a lot of times we can look at what we're doing and think that that is what we do is what is defiling us. But what we do is coming from what's inside of us. So it's like you're not defiled because of those acts. Those acts were happening because of what is in your heart and mind that caused you to do that in the first place. So just knowing that, what you put in you is what defiles you. Like you said, it starts with a thought. It didn't start with you doing the act. Yep. It started with a thought.
And you can even take it a step further. It can start with a thought, and then you start speaking it over yourself. How many times have, people my age range or watched a movie and saw a shirtless man, whether it was, a particular actor or a famous actor or a bodybuilder, and you spoke certain things or you wanted to find somebody to look like him, and God didn't have that for you, but you're speaking it over you. It starts with the lust. You're looking at it. Then you start speaking it, and then you start acting on it, and then it turns into something else. It just grows to something, more damaging. It's interesting.
Like giving you an idea of, this is the idea of this is the person that I'm going to be with.
Yes.
But it's like, it says who?
Right.
Exactly. And God looks at the heart, not the outward appearance like we do.
Right. That's good.
It's good stuff. Okay. So thank you for just sharing your process and your journey with the Lord and celibacy and how he's, teaching you new things in terms of spiritual gifts and just helping you learn more about yourself and the world around you and just how you're so active and involved in a lot of things. I think that's just really great, and just journeying with the Lord is good. And your first book, what would you say is your favorite part about your first book? And then can you share a little bit about your vision for your second book?
Yes, absolutely. So the first book, I think there's two things, is talking about what I went through, the deliverance, and then the deliverance. Deliverance was a choice. A lot of people don't choose to go through a deliverance and have things taken off of them, which I think is so important. If you open yourself up to someone, you can cause spiritual spouses, spiritual husbands, spiritual wives. You can cause all kind of things that happen to you. So going through that deliverance allowed me to rebuke and bind and pull things out of my body and off of me. So it wouldn't later turn into something like a sickness or future sin. So deliverance was a huge thing. So actually it's probably three. So sharing the story, the deliverance, and then being set free from it and walking in that. Seeing how God was, how I was being healed and how people were coming to me, to help me in ways I never even thought I could get help, in those ways, and just seeing how that kind of opened up in that area. So that's for the first book. Yeah. The second book is amazing. It's actually a follow-up journal to the first book. So I take you on a journey through each chapter. So you want to kind of read the book first. There are some spoilers in the second book. Each day I have you walk through the chapter, that first chapter or second chapter, and then I kind of take you on a journey. I take you out of your element. It is an interactive journal. There are some pieces in there that may make you feel uncomfortable if you go through the full journal and do it, and not only write and journal about it, but actually go through the exercises. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just you and God, so be vulnerable, open yourself up for healing, and just watch how God moves. So that second one is amazing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone who is living a promiscuous lifestyle?
So it would depend. If you're living that lifestyle and you want to be a Christian, or you feel like you're a lukewarm Christian, I may have, different things to say about that. If you're living that lifestyle and you want to live for Christ, then turn away from it. Find a way to turn away from it. And it starts with prayer. It starts with getting into a church home near your home, talking to like-minded people, your pastor, and don't let people stray you away. Focus on the ending result, and that ending result is getting healing. If you're someone who lives that lifestyle and you're not living for Christ, then I just say, then when you're ready to learn more about God, go after that, but do it sooner than later, because in the end, you got to choose where you're going. I'll give him some questions, some food for thought, and go from there.
And then to wrap us up, what would you say the big picture is when you look back on your journey and just what you talked about in the book? What's the big picture?
The big picture is when you turn away from sin, just know something else is going to come around and try to take you back down. You can't totally live from sin. There's always going to be something coming around that draws you back in. But just know you yourself can go to Christ. You can get on your hands and knees and ask the Lord to forgive you. I tell people also, it's not a game when you come to Christ. Christ is real. Jesus is real. He's going to talk to you. He wants to have that relationship with you. He wants to speak with you, but he's so gentle. He's not going to force anything on you. So if that's what you're desiring, go for it. Go for it. Go for your healing. Go for your foreverness living with Jesus Christ, because he is the way.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for sharing and just having this conversation with me. I really appreciated it and took some nuggets and food for thought. So where can people find your book? Are you on social media?
Absolutely. I am on Instagram. My book is on Amazon. You can search my name, Alisha Boykin, or you can search Alisha's testimony. It's everywhere. You can just Google it. It's on Goodreads. It's Walmart. It's everywhere. On my Linktree, you can also, get in contact with me. You can email me. I'm open for discussions. Again, I'm an open book. I'm willing to share stories or even just talk to people and just kind of hear where their mind is at. If they're trying to think through something and just can't figure it out, talking to someone like-minded may help you get the bigger picture.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Alisha. And thank you all for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a rating and review. Follow Big Picture on Instagram, and I'll have that linked in the show notes. So thank y'all for listening, and see y'all in the next episode.
Thank you.